Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. Today marked the start of the trial of Laken Riley. And the person on the thumbnail to the right is Jose Ibarra. And this is the state of Georgia versus Jose Ibarra for the murder of Laken Riley. A case that is really highly charged and very much sort of not just shocked the University of Georgia campus, the state of Georgia, but the entire country. And without getting into the politics of it, Jose Ibarra is probably what we would consider in this country as a career criminal. And what bothers me about this is that not only was he in this country illegally, but there was no vetting done whatsoever on this guy to check his background. And it turns out he's a gangbanger and he's a career criminal in Venezuela. He is a hunter. He is a sex offender. He probably has murdered and committed sex offenses in his home country. How would we know that? How would we possibly know that when no one checks that out? You know, one of my things, of course, of being a 27-year veteran of the NYPD, to me, public safety is one of the most important things that government provides. And when they refuse to provide it by allowing our borders to be breached by people who are criminals, career criminals, and they don't protect our citizenry, to me, that is absolutely horrific. This is according to the New York Times. In a courtroom in Athens, Georgia, on Friday, today, prosecutors started by laying out the harrowing details of a violent encounter that deeply unsettled the city, which is home to the University of Georgia. Laken Riley's body was found along a wooded trail on the university campus. Prosecutors said the man, Jose Ibarra, was on the university campus on the morning of February 22nd wearing a black hooded sweatshirt, a black hat, and disposable kitchen gloves. He went hunting for females. Sheila Ross, the special prosecutor leading the case, said in her opening statements. Miss Ross told the court that Mr. Ibarra found Miss Riley, 22, who was out for a morning run and blocked her as she tried to call 911. Miss Riley scratched his arms and his neck as she tried to get away. He pulled up her running top over her neck in an attempt to rape her, prosecutors said. And then he strangled her and hit her over the head repeatedly with a rock. The evidence will show that Laken fought, Miss Ross said. She fought for her life. She fought for her dignity. But lawyers for Ibarra, who's 26 years old, argued that as graphic as the evidence was in capturing the violence inflicted on Miss Riley, it failed to conclusively connect Mr. Ibarra to the scene. The evidence that Jose Ibarra killed anyone is circumstantial, said Dustin W. Kirby, a lawyer for Mr. Ibarra. Mr. Ibarra was arrested on February 23rd, the day after the attack, and has remained in custody without bail since then. He has pleaded not guilty to the array of charges he faces, including a malice murder and aggravated assault. The charges also include a single peeping Tom count. Prosecutors said he peered into the windows of someone else's campus apartment on the day Miss Riley was killed. So absolutely horrific attack. And we'll go over what the evidence means and what the evidence is. And circumstantial evidence, I know that's a fancy legal word. What it means is for which inferences may be drawn. And circumstantial evidence, although defense attorneys try to poo-poo it, circumstantial evidence, when there's a lot of it, is very, 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 very powerful evidence. And that's all they have, is to attack the evidence. So, folks, hold on to your seats, hold on to your hats, hold on to your loved ones, hold on to your drink, your coffee. If it is your coffee, you're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the off-the-cuff zone, the police off-the-cuff zone.
There has to be some common sense.
They were the ones who called 911 to get him help, and now they're calling for change.
Before we start the show, first, a word from our sponsor. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, NBA and college basketball, NHL to UFC and MMA. Head to BetOnline today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here. Joining me today, I know he's a crowd favorite, a fan favorite. In fact, I'm getting a little jealous of his popularity. Not really, but anyway, retired NYPD Sergeant, professor at Albertus Magnus College in Connecticut, attorney. Welcome to the show, Professor Mike Geary. Welcome, Mike.
Bill, thank you for having me on. Good to see you. Good to see you.
You know, Mike, we spoke about this case, and, you know, the more I hear about this case and the more I learn about this defendant and some of the information that on the very start of the case today, the trial, it's really disturbing, because how many other Jose Ibarras have been let into this country? And I don't even want to totally, I don't want to concentrate on that part of it. I want to concentrate on the attack in this poor, innocent 22-year-old nursing student who was just about love and about doing great things and about she had so much to offer this world until she met this savage on the right here who shouldn't have been in this damn country, who's a career criminal, who's a career criminal. And that this is the people they let across our border. And then if you say anything about it, oh my God, he's a migrant, not an illegal alien. Your thoughts?
Yeah, Bill, people have to realize that in any population, it could be American citizens across the United States, it could be citizens, say, of New York, for every 100,000, million, or whatever number you want to look at, there's always going to be a certain percentage of criminals. There's going to be a certain percentage of murderers, 1/10 of 1% or something like that. But there's always going to be a certain percentage of criminals involved when you have any sort of population. And you have a population that comes into our country illegally. The very first thing, they are all criminals because they are actually all here illegally. But when you get them here, say 10 or 20 million of them, you're going to have it no matter what. It doesn't matter where they come from. You're going to have a certain number of murderers, rapists, kidnappers, thieves, that sort of thing. It's just going to happen. And this was our own shooting ourselves in the foot. And we shot ourselves in the foot for all these years. And this is what happens, because poor Laken Riley would be a nurse right now, taking care of people in their sickness if it wasn't for this savage. And it was totally avoidable, completely avoidable. And that's the sad part of it. She had so much to give to people. She'd be out there in a hospital taking care of people. But no, this guy met up with her. Look, he was going to rape and kill someone. And maybe he wasn't stalking her in particular. Maybe he was just looking for an opportunity, anyone he came across. But poor Laken Riley happened to meet him, and she fought for her life. And the good thing is she scarred him up enough that he's readily identifiable. So that we hope that justice will be done.
An interesting thing is that in this case, the attorneys for Jose Ibarra have chosen a bench trial, and the judge's name is Judge Patrick Haggard. You can choose a judge trial, or you can choose a jury trial. To me, and to many people watching this case, it really didn't make a lot of sense as to why they chose a judge trial, because there is evidence when we talk about linkage. There is linkage evidence, tremendous linkage evidence on this case. And the linkage evidence is DNA. We always talk about DNA underneath a victim's fingernails. Well, whose DNA do you think they found underneath Laken Riley's fingernails? Yes, Jose Ibarra. All right. His cell phone, her cell phone, blood, all those things were transferred onto him. He's seen throwing parts of her clothing into a dumpster. It sounds like Stefan Stearns from the other case, the Madeline Soto case. So I don't understand why, and it doesn't matter to me. I want to see this guy put away for the rest of his life because this was such a savage. I want to play a little bit of prosecutor Sheila Ross's opening statement. We'll see some of the evidence.
Underneath Laken's right fingernails. He also left behind in a struggle with her over her phone, because the court will hear that she called 911. He left behind his left thumbprint on her iPhone, which was found not far from her body at the crime scene. And it is that forensic evidence alone that would give you enough evidence to find him guilty as charged on the counts in this indictment. But the evidence in this case will come in basically three forms. There'll be forensic evidence, there will be digital evidence, and there will be video evidence. And all three forms of those evidence will point to one person, Jose Ibarra, as the killer of Laken Riley. And this is not working. We'll start with a timeline. The timeline is established by a lot of the digital evidence that you're going to hear about. And for Laken, that timeline begins basically at 9:03 in the morning. At 9:03 on Thursday, February 22nd, Laken Riley did something that she does all the time, and she went out for a morning jog. She lives not far from the crime scene, and Your Honor is going to see several maps in this case, and you will see that where Laken Riley lived, where the defendant lived, where our other victim who you're going to hear from in this trial, Tasia Swede, lived, Building S at the University of Georgia Student Housing, and where items of evidence were dumped in this case and where Laken was murdered. It's all clustered together. And it's all clustered together within about a half-mile radius of one another. And you'll see several maps throughout this case. But she left her house at 9:03 in the morning. We know that for several reasons. She was captured on her Ring doorbell. And you'll see that video through our first witness. And she also was captured on a trail cam that becomes very important in this case. And at about 9:05 a.m., she's captured running from her house down Rogers Road, eventually towards the crime scene where she encounters this defendant. She is running, as you will see, with a few things that are important. 2 AirPods, and they are noise-canceling AirPods, and her phone, her iPhone, is in her left hand. She's wearing typical running clothes, and you're going to hear a little bit about how she runs, what she runs with, because these things are important to judge what eventually happened between her and this defendant on the trail. She wears typically very tight running clothes because that's what's comfortable when you run, so it doesn't get it doesn't come off or get loose when you're running. And so this particular day, she's wearing running tights, white Hoka shoes, and 3 layers of clothing on her top. She's wearing a running bra, a shirt, and a tight black running jacket when she leaves her house. At 9:11 a.m. exactly, Laken is a few minutes into her run, and we have some digital data which we'll talk to you about, which is a Garmin watch that Laken had gotten for Christmas that she's wearing on her run. And this watch captured a lot of important data that you're going to hear about. But she is on her run, and her phone, she activates the emergency function of her iPhone. And you're going to hear about that through testimony of the witnesses who examined her phone. She activates the emergency function of her iPhone, and she attempts to call 911, and she, in fact, does call 911. Her call is connected to ACC PD. At 9:12, you'll hear that the call was hung up, and I'm going to play the call for you. At 9:12, the call was hung up by the caller, not the 911 center. The 911 center did not hang up on Laken Riley. The phone hung up. And at 9:12, they tried to call her back, and there was no answer. This is an enhanced version of the 911 call, and there will be several stipulations between the parties in this case. We will execute a waiver of them as they come in. One of the stipulations was that this 911 call was sent to the FBI in Quantico, where they attempted to enhance the call. And this is a 1 minute and 8 second call, and this is the enhanced version of that call. And I'd like the court, when listening to the call, right about 55 seconds into the call, you're going to hear a voice.
Hello, this is Clark County 911. Hello, Clark County 911. Can anyone hear me?
She obviously was beaten so bad she couldn't speak.
Right.
Clark County 911.
Heartbreaking for her parents are in the courtroom hearing this.
Yo Tango. There is a long break in what happens next. It was Laken's mom, who Laken usually talks to on her run, who started calling Laken at around 9:06 that morning. And you'll just see the call logs from that and the evidence of that through Laken's phone. And when she could not reach Laken, she began calling Laken's 3 roommates. And you'll meet all 3 of them: Lily Steiner, Sophia Magana, and Connolly Huff. All 3 of them are University of Georgia students at the time. They were all seniors. And Laken herself was at UGA, but had recently transferred to the University of Augusta Athens campus because she wanted to be a nurse. But the 4 of them still live together. And the roommates are all, I would say, technologically savvy and security savvy. And they all 4 had iPhones. And there's a function with an iPhone called Find My iPhone, which you can share your location with other people. And the 4 ladies in that house, roommates, shared their digital location with one another 24/7. And so when Allison Phillips, Laken's mom, began calling and looking for Laken, she notified all the roommates. And then the roommates started checking the ring door camera, checking for Laken, texting Laken, calling Laken, and no response. I will say that this particular day, February 22nd of 2024, happened to be the day where there was a widespread phone outage by AT&T. And so some of the girls did have AT&T as their service provider. Laken did not. She's Verizon. And so the girls were having phone problems due to that widespread outage. And so you'll hear about how that kind of interfered with their ability to really find where she was. But eventually, they could not find her. They could not find her for hours. And even though Laken would go out on long runs, she always had her phone with her, so they became concerned. So at around 11:30 on the day of her murder, 2 roommates, Sophia and Lily, went and walked the trails back behind the intramural fields at the University of Georgia where Laken used to run. But they also had her digital profile. And her digital profile put her in the middle of the Oconee Forest, and they had noticed that she had not moved. She had not moved for hours. And so they walked to where they could last see her digital profile, and the two roommates found one of Laken's AirPods. They photographed it, they collected it, they went back to their house where they could have Wi-Fi to connect because they had no phone service in the forest and the outage was on. And at 12:05 p.m., they called the University of Georgia police and reported that Laken Riley was missing. So it isn't until the police respond immediately, and they take that digital profile, and you'll meet Sergeant Maxwell. He is the officer that found Laken's body. And it takes him, even with her digital profile, this is a very forested area. And she obviously wasn't on the running trail. She was off the running trail. And it took him about 25 minutes, even with her digital profile, for him to locate her. And he did locate her, and you're going to see the body cam footage of him locating her. And what he found when he found her is that she was hidden, kind of almost under a tree and covered up with a bunch of leaves. The first thing he noticed was that her breasts were completely exposed. All three layers of her top clothing were pulled up above and around her neck. He also noticed that her running tights that she typically wears above her navel were pulled down. Her underwear was protruding from her tights. He also noticed severe injuries to the left side of her head. He began immediately trying to save her life, but he could tell that she was dead. She was cold. But he began CPR, and you will see the efforts of him and several other University of Georgia police officers where they try to save her. They have to move her out of this area so that they could get her flat on the ground.
So, Mike, we'll go back to this, but this is horrific because it shows several things, right?
Yeah.
The attack took place at one location, and the body was dragged to another location in an attempt to hide it, which is what, I don't want to keep calling this guy names, but criminals like him, it's what they do. They plan, they enact their plan, and they follow through with the plan. Things obviously went wrong for this mope because he didn't count for her to fight for her life as hard as she did. And so he needed another plan. He needed to hit her over the head with a rock. He needed to shut off her phone when she called 911. But that left evidence of being there. His thumbprint is on her iPhone. I don't know how the defense explains that one away, Mike. His
Bill,
DNA is underneath her fingernails. I don't know how the defense, combats that or files a reason it should be under her fingernails other than he is the murderer, Mike.
Yeah, Bill, when I listened to the defense attorney's opening statements, that's Mr. Dustin Kirby's statements, it seemed like it was written, a while ago when he was anticipating talking to a jury during opening statements. But now that things have changed and now he's talking before the judge. He's talking before the judge, and you're going to speak to a judge very differently than you're going to speak to a jury. Now, he talked numerous times about the fact that all of the evidence that is brought in against Ibarra is all circumstantial evidence, as if circumstantial evidence is nothing. It's like saying we only found, one strand and the DNA from an attacker at a crime scene. Oh, and that's all it is. What is it? It's only touch DNA, like trying to denigrate it like it's really not valuable. No, that's ridiculous. Circumstantial evidence is as strong as direct evidence. All circumstantial evidence needs is for the jury to make a logical connection between the evidence and the inference you get from the evidence. So even the DNA under poor Laken Riley's fingernails, The defendant's DNA, the defendant's skin cells under her fingernails is considered circumstantial evidence. You can't get any more powerful than that. And then on top of that, you've got his thumbprint on her cell phone, probably where he was grabbing it and pressing down to turn off her cell phone. He left his fingerprint. That is circumstantial evidence too. So I'm listening to the defense attorney's opening statements, and he's talking about, oh, Your Honor, this is only circumstantial evidence. And I'm thinking, you know what? You shouldn't be talking to the judge that way. Circumstantial evidence, you know, the judge knows. He's been doing this for many years. He knows what circumstantial evidence is. This is not a unique concept to him that he never heard before. So he doesn't really have anywhere to go. He doesn't have a story. This is not like a mistaken identity story because there was a really bad lineup done and he was picked out of a lineup and, falsely accused. Or this is a story based on, a half of a single fingerprint or something like that. No, not whatsoever. He doesn't really have anywhere to go. All he could do is try to denigrate the prosecution's case, but the judge will not listen to him. The judge knows what circumstantial evidence is, and there is plenty of it. Ibarra, he's an animal. What he did, he hunted someone down, he attacked them, and when things went wrong, he left, but he dragged her body off so it wouldn't be found. That's all consciousness of guilt, and he ran. He got the hell out of there. But all of the charges, including the attempted rape charges, they are all appropriate. They are all very appropriate. And there's, no, he said it's circumstantial evidence of rape, but of a possible rape, attempted rape, but that it never really happened. It can't really be proven. He's trying his best, but he doesn't really have much to work with. Ibarra is guilty as all hell.
But Mike, in a way that they can show that he was preparing
Sure.
to attack someone.
Sure, absolutely.
He shows that he has gloves. He brought gloves with him,
Right.
like rubber gloves.
Yeah.
Again, you talk about consciousness of guilt, and
That's right.
the prosecutor is going to talk about that as I bring up this next thing. So,
yeah,
he planned this, and some of the things when you say they really can't prove attempted rape. Well, why was her shirt up above her head?
That's
Why
right.
was her pants pulled down?
That's
I
right.
think they can put that in there as special circumstances, but there's no death penalty in the state of Georgia. They can maybe get him for life without parole, which the power of this evidence and the fact that there's a judge in this and not a jury, I think that this judge is no fool. And he may very well not be amused by any of this, not that anyone would be. Claudia Landerstoffer, thank you for the 5-pound super sticker. This poor, beautiful, and young girl attacked by such a creep and so brutally unalived. I hope there will be justice for her. Claudia, we all do. And that's why we're sort of covering this case, because it's an important case. And just to see that there are people, evil people like this out there. I'm going to go back to the prosecutor because she does an excellent opening statement.
They give her chest compressions. They give her CPR. They put those pads on her chest to try to start her heart. Eventually, the fire department and EMS comes and they do the same. They work her for several minutes, but she is dead. She is dead. And there was nothing they could do to stop it or help her. You'll see the crime scene measurements. The crime scene in this case was worked by the GBI in conjunction with UGAPD. You will hear in this case from GBI, UGAPD, FBI, and ACCPD. The four of them really in conjunction worked this case. And the crime scene, importantly, when they get there, there's really very few items there. But item number one, where you see on the trail, is the other AirPod that Laken was wearing at the time that she was running. And then they saw a disturbed area of leaves to a point where they found 2 rocks in a tree, both of whom have, all 3 of which have Laken's blood on them. And then Laken's body was a few feet away from that, where you see the green there. And then her phone was not found near her body, it was found where you see item number 8, which is the other tree that you see there. But her person was taken 64 feet off that trail. So from where AirPod is, item number 1, to where you see items 2, 3, and 4 is 65 feet. So in legal terms, he escorted her 64 feet off of that trail so that he could attempt to victimize her. This is the crime scene. You'll see how wooded it is and why it took Sergeant Maxwell so long to find her, even though he did have her digital profile. And in here, this photo is actually the phone. And so it took them a really long time to find the phone. They were calling the phone, they were pinging the phone. Her phone was on silent, so they couldn't hear it. I mean, it wasn't until it got dark that they could find her phone. But they kept looking for her phone because they knew the phone was there. And they found it. And when they found it, this is what Daniela Stewart of the GBI saw on her iPhone, exactly where your thumb would be if you go to hang up a call on the iPhone.
Wow, wow, wow.
Right.
How powerful is that? How does the mope who did this, how does his fingerprint, thumbprint of all things, get on the victim's cell phone?
Yeah. Circumstantial evidence of guilt.
Yeah, like
Absolutely.
Mike, circumstantial. Yeah, it's so weak, circumstantial.
Yeah. So weak. Yeah. Right. The fingerprint of the alleged killer is on the phone. Yeah. That's weak. That's what
For
defense
those
attorneys
that-
would want you to believe.
For those that are listening to this, there's a perfect fingerprint on the cell phone belonging to Laken Riley. And I don't know if I guess they already dusted it. It looks like there's dust on it, fingerprint dust. And if you don't know, fingerprints are lifted by putting dust that adheres to the fingerprint, and then the print is lifted with a piece of a special tape and then put on a fingerprint card where it's more easily read by a fingerprint technician that can look through AFIS or simply, in this case, they have a suspect, compare it against the fingerprints of Jose Ibarra. And this is a really outstanding looking fingerprint. Yes, circumstantial evidence. So weak evidence, not.
At the bottom of the iPhone, she found this latent print in blood. They processed the phone immediately, and that latent print was sent to ACCPD. And we'll talk about that a little later. And here's some of the Garmin data. And there are some things that we will never know about exactly what happened between Jose Ibarra and Laken Riley on that trail, but we know enough. And what we know is that at 9:10 a.m. from her Garmin that she was wearing, as she is trucking along, she is clipping 7-minute miles. She's running, doing her thing, listening to music. Something happens. He does something to her to make her stop dead in her tracks. She initiates the SOS function on her phone and calls 911, and she immediately stops. And after that, you'll see some of this Garmin data, her movement, because it went to the FBI CAS team. They're the ones that analyze it, and you'll hear about it.
So Laken Riley's on her run, and she sees danger. And she enacts the emergency 911 call on her phone, and that's how the call went through. But at the same time, this mope knows that she's trying to call 911, so he wants to get the phone away from her. So it would make sense he tried to grab the phone. But at the same time, he probably hit her in the head with a rock to render her unconscious or to render her helpless. Claudia Landisoffer, thank you again for the 5-pound super sticker. Fellow ladies, if you go for a run outside, be careful about the area and time and possible run in groups over the dog. One of the things that Laken Riley did, and again, no victim blaming whatsoever, but I tell you guys, it's probably not a good idea to wear earbuds when you're running because you can't hear what's going on around you, and I know that takes away the pleasure of running when you can hear music as you're running, but If you're going to run by yourself, you got to consider safety first and worry about the music later. If you're going to run with other runners, then listen to your music. And I would recommend that you never run alone anyway. You know, Claudia Lanzasoffer said, "Oh, run with your dog." I don't know if Laken Riley had a dog, but that can also potentially save your life. But two things probably not good to wear earbuds, and B, don't run alone. It's a shame that we have to think like this, but in the world we live in, that is absolutely the case. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. If you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective in the right place. If you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button on the screen. Give us a thumbs up, ring that bell. If you want to contribute to us, we have a Patreon with 4 different levels. We also have a YouTube channel membership with 5 different levels, and you can join and become a member of the Police Off the Cuff YouTube channel. Mike, I've been talking a lot. Your thoughts?
Yeah, Bill, you know, this is a very simple fact pattern case. There's not a lot of people and movement going on in the scene. It seems very simple. And the Georgia police and the local police and the police on the campus did a great job. They were fantastic. They worked. Thankfully, they found, poor Laken Riley, although she was already deceased. They found her quickly and they got her to hospital. And so in terms of retrieving physical evidence, they did a great job there. And also in looking in the woods, you've done, looked for, in a city street, looking for a gun or a knife that might have been thrown away. And, you get the emergency service lights out there and you're trying to light up a street or an alleyway. And you know how difficult it is to try to find something and to see that, to have discovered the evidence like the cell phone. I mean, next to DNA evidence underneath poor Laken Riley's fingernails, finding his thumbprint on the cell phone is fantastic. So that's like number 1 evidence is the DNA. Number 2 is the cell phone. And you have her movements, and you really pretty much know the exact time she was attacked because her phone stopped, the traveling of the phone, pinging and things like that stopped. We know exactly where the crime happened. And so it's really, I don't want to say open and shut case because you just never know what could happen in the trial, but it seems really fairly obvious that, we know what happened to poor Laken, we know where it happened, and we know who did it. But he has his right to a trial. He's getting his trial. And I would imagine that since it's Friday, this trial will be over by the end of next week. And hopefully he'll get justice.
Absolutely. Jane C., thank you so much for the $2.99 super sticker. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Let me go back to the DA. There's more evidence, believe it or not. If that evidence already shown, they also have video evidence and evidence of him throwing away property belonging to Laken Riley in the dumpster. It reminds us, of course, of Stefan Stearns,
Right.
Who we believe killed Madeline Soto. Consciousness of guilt, as Professor Geary says all the time.
Thank you.
She's on this trail with this defendant for about 4 minutes, and then you see 4 minutes later her Garmin move 65 feet into the woods, and there's some additional movement of her along that time, and her heart rate is still going until 9:28 a.m. Her encounter with him was long. Her fight with him was fierce. And that is what the Garmin data shows. And once her heart stops at 9:28 a.m., there's no more movement from her Garmin. So what happens next? Well, UGA PD leave, and they really got nothing other than a peeping Tom incident that had occurred on campus at 7:57 a.m. I'm going to talk to you about that one last. So what they do is it is a combination of good police work and luck, pure luck. But they start dumpster diving. ACCPD's dumpster diving, UGA.
I really like this assistant district attorney, Sheila Ross, but police work is not luck. You make your own luck. You know what I mean? Hard work. There was an old expression, Someone told me one time, he said his grandfather said, you work 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, and then luck comes in. And that's true. And that's true with police work. You do all the right things. You follow procedure. You follow leads. You do what you're supposed to do. And then you get lucky.
PD is dumpster diving. GBI is dumpster diving. FBI is dumpster diving. Everybody is just looking into every dumpster in the Athens area for anything because they had nothing. And at a dumpster, at an apartment complex where he lived, a police officer named Zach Davis of ACCPD finds this hoodie jacket. And when he looks in and sees it, it's in a recycling bin, and it's standing out because it's right on top. And he noticed it had long, dark hair on it, wrapped around one of the buttons, and he could see blood. And he thought that was suspicious. So he calls UGA PD. They respond at 9 o'clock on the day of Laken's murder. They collect the jacket found in the dumpster, and they send it immediately to the GBI Crime Lab indicator for testing. But while they're there, they notice, they look around and see that one of the residents in this apartment in B32 had what's called a UP camera, which is like a ring camera, but looks a little different, had a camera aimed at that dumpster. And so they asked the resident that night, hey, can we come in? Can we see your camera? He agreed to let them see it, and this is what they saw. At 9:44 in the morning, about 15 minutes after Laken Riley's heart stopped, this is what they see.
Yeah. Jose Ibarra walking toward the dumpster with what appears to be a jacket in his hand. How unusual.
Right.
What excellent video, too.
Yeah, good quality. It's not grainy.
They could actually make stills from that. They could probably also zoom in on it. Here he throws away the incriminating piece of evidence into the dumpster. And then he walks home. I mean, how much better evidence do you need? And again, when we talk about how the defense is going to provide a defense, explain this one, that just so happens to be Laken Riley's jacket.
They did not know who it was at the time. Dump the jacket in the dumpster and go to those bushes there and dump something there. So they go to the bushes, and this video has been enhanced, and I'm sure you're going to hear a lot of testimony about this video, enhanced the best they could by GBI Cyber. And I know the court sat through some motions to suppress for this black Adidas hat. There was a lot of discussion about, and you're going to hear more about all of those things. But this is an image that they locked in on and began to circulate around the neighborhood, or as the cops call a bolo. Be on the lookout for this individual. They didn't know who he was, and they circulated that. But they did go also that night, still the night of February 22nd, to the bushes, and they found 3 black disposable kitchen gloves. And those gloves were also sent immediately to the crime lab. And one of the interesting things about the black disposable gloves when they got to the crime lab and they were analyzed, this is a picture taken at the crime lab, is that on the thumb of the gloves, there was a hole. There's also other holes in the gloves, and they found them. But on the thumb area of one of the gloves that the crime lab examined, they found a hole. And they also found blood, and that blood was later to be determined to be Laken Riley's blood on those gloves. So I've already told you about the geographic locations. They're all clustered. You can see in this map, the crime scene is at the top in the middle, called by the crime scene. The dumpster where the items were found is marked. Building S is right by the bus stop, and then Laken Riley lives further up in the Village Avenue towards the top of this photo. But the distance between the Building S, which will become important, and Laken Riley's body is about 300 yards. The distance between the dumpster and Laken Riley's body is about 500 yards. And the distance between the dumpster and the bus stop and where the defendant lived, because he lived in that apartment complex, is about 150 yards. Everything is close together. So what happened next in the investigation is that the very next morning on Friday, February 23rd at 8:32 a.m. as ACCPD, again, is just looking out for anything. They had the bolo at that point. They encounter a person named Diego Ibarra. And Diego Ibarra is wearing a black Adidas hat that had some interest to them, which is they believe to be the identical hat that they had seen in the video the night before. And I will tell you this, on that hat that Diego Ibarra was wearing the next day is Laken Riley's blood. So their theory that that was in fact the same hat was absolutely correct. So they encounter Diego Ibarra. He gives them a fake green card. They know it's fake because it has 2 different dates of birth on it. And so they ask him to go back to his residence, and they begin talking to him. UGAPD arrives, and they begin to take over the scene. From the information that they had gotten from Diego Ibarra, they knew that hat was a hat seen in the video because of the proximity of the crime. And at some point, Diego began telling them he's got brothers in the house sleeping, and there were many communication difficulties at first because the first responding officers did not speak Spanish. No one in this apartment, D126, could speak English. So at some point, UGA brought 2 of their Spanish-speaking officers on scene, and communication became a little easier. Officer Bridges, Officer Sand, both of whom are native speakers of Spanish, arrived and began taking over in the communications. When they get there, they are attempting to secure the residence for a warrant, and before they could do a security sweep to secure the residence for a warrant, Argenis Ibarra, who's in the middle in this slide, comes out with a garbage bag in his hand. He eventually gives officers consent to enter the residence, and when Sergeant Epps enters the residence, he sees Jose Ibarra asleep in the bed. And that is how he's been identified in this case. You will see that there are 5 residents that live in apartment D126. Jose Antonio Ibarra, this defendant, also goes by the name of Victor, which will be important because a lot of the communications within his phone and some of the witnesses just call him Victor. So Jose Ibarra is Victor. It is in fact the same person. Diego Ibarra is Jose's older brother, goes by the name of El Gocho, is a nickname that many people, including this defendant, call him El Gocho. Argenis goes by Manny. And Rosbelli Flores Bello goes by La Gorda, and then Juan Carlos Diaz Hernandez, they call Carlito. And I suspect the state will tell you right now, we're going to hear from Rosbelli in that residence. You will also hear that all the residents, Diego, Argenis, and Rosbelli, at least those 3, are currently in federal custody, some immigration issues. But we are going to produce Rosbelli to testify to the court about the things that she saw and observed that day. And it is Rosbelli who identifies Jose Ibarra from the dumpster video. The officers, when they saw Jose Ibarra that day, saw that he had many injuries to him. Scratches on his arm, scratches on his wrist, scratches on the back of his neck, scratches on his hands. And they photographed those injuries to him. And then they began to do an additional canvass of this entire apartment complex. There are multiple buildings in this apartment complex, A, B, C, D, and E. Multiple teams of agents began going around looking for cameras, talking to residents. What do they know? What do they not know? And one of the things that they found was that the Ibarras lived at D126. Right next to them is D125, and right next to D125 is D124. 124 had a ring camera. 125 had a still camera. And they went and collected videos from those 2 apartments. And importantly, on the day that Laken Riley was murdered, at 10:21 a.m., Jose Ibarra is captured on D124, coming out of his apartment with a bag, and now his clothes have changed. He's wearing different clothes than he was wearing about 40 minutes ago. And he has a bag in his hand, and he's walking towards a dumpster, another dumpster in their apartment complex. And that dumpster, by the way, had been emptied the day of the murder. So when the officers went to check that dumpster had nothing in it for them. But in the next door neighbors, still Cannon was shot at 10:24 a.m. 3 minutes later. Jose Ibarra is walking back towards his apartment, empty-handed, nothing in his hand. So they searched the residence that day, and they found a few things of significance. Number one, they found 3 more black disposable kitchen gloves, which were sent to trace evidence for plastics and polymer examination, and they concluded that they had originated from the same source as the gloves that were recovered in the bushes. They recovered 2 of the defendant's Samsung cell phones, which you will hear some evidence out of, but they also found no bloody clothing, no bloody anything, and the shirt and the satchel that you see the defendant wearing in the video, the dumpster video, were never found. They're not in the residence. So what other forensic evidence? The parties will stipulate to the prior Daubert hearing that this court has heard, so we will not be recalling the fingerprint evidence, but we will have a stipulation with the transcript and all of the exhibits that thumbprint, latent print that was on the phone was sent to ACCPD that night. And eventually, the digital image of that thumbprint on Laken Riley's phone was compared to Diego Ibarra, Argenis Ibarra, Chris Valley, and Juan Carlos, and they were all excluded. They didn't leave that thumbprint behind. It was matched to this defendant, Jose Ibarra. It is Jose Ibarra's left thumb on Laken Riley's thumb. And the analyst or the expert who did that analysis testified at the Daubert hearing. He showed the court 15 points of comparison that he found, and his results were peer-reviewed by another examiner. They were peer-reviewed blind, and she agreed with him. There's also DNA in this case, and you're going to hear about 3 different types of DNA: traditional, YSTR, and true allele. All true allele is probabilistic genotyping, but it is a computer software program that deconvolutes or separates complex mixtures of DNA. That's what true allele does. But before you can go to true allele, you have to start with traditional DNA. So all of the items of evidence that you're going to hear DNA results from started with the traditional DNA. They were swabbed, they were amplified, they were quantified, all the things that you do with regular DNA. But we do have some regular DNA results in this case. First and foremost, the jacket. The jacket found in the dumpster has blood on it, and in the blood for traditional DNA is Laken Riley's DNA and the defendant's DNA, and only the 2 of them. Jose Ibarra and Laken Riley's blood are on the jacket that he dumped in the dumpster. The rocks and the trees from the crime scene, they were also processed for DNA, for latent prints, and for everything we got. But on the rocks in the tree, just Laken's DNA, Laken's blood on the rocks in the tree. They attempted at first, which is protocol, to do what's called YSTR DNA testing on Laken's fingernails. So both her left and her right hands were swabbed by the medical examiner in this case, and they were both sent to DNA for analysis. YSTR is a better fit for trying to separate male and females because only males have Y chromosomes, and so they attempted YSTR first, and they were successful. The problem with YSTR, and the officers did gather the DNA of Jose Ibarra, Diego Ibarra, and Argenis Ibarra. They are brothers, and blood brothers share the same paternal line, and they share the same YSTR profile, unless there's a genetic mutation. And what the lab found when they tested the fingernails of Laken Riley is that, first of all, the left hand is nothing. No DNA of any other person other than Laken. But on her right hand, there was male DNA. And for the YSTR testing that they tried first, Jose Ibarra could not be excluded as the donor of that YSTR profile, and neither could Argenis, because, again, they're blood brothers, they share the same YSTR profile. But Diego could be excluded. And that's because Diego carries a genetic mutation that the lab was able to see and he was able to be excluded as the donor of YSTR profile underneath Laken's names. But after the YSTR was done, it was then sent to True Allele along with a lot of other items. And when True Allele tested, and the data was sent into the True Allele program, it wasn't tested, but when the data was sent into the True Allele program, True Allele excluded Argenis as the donor. True Allele excluded Diego, who had already been excluded by STR anyway, but True Allele matched Jose Ibarra to the DNA underneath Laken's right fingernails, to this likelihood ratio, which I have before the court here. 10 billion times more probable than a coincidental match. I will tell you, the gloves that were tested, that's all just Laken's blood, the black gloves that were in the bushes. There's a straw that was tested, that is the defendant's blood. I'm going to talk to you about that a little later. And then the hat, the black Adidas hat, is also Laken's blood. And then the jacket also did contact swabs. So in addition to the blood on the jacket, it did contact swabs that were sent to True Allele. And again, it's the defendant and Laken on the jacket.
Unbelievable amount of physical evidence, and we haven't even watched the testimonial evidence. Just well, I'll let you comment that 1 second, Mike. Hey, Paula, thank you for the £9.99 super sticker. This is so very sad. Aren't killed, but I have faith in the U.S. justice system. UK awful child essay probation, nasty tweet, hate crime, 18 months free speech under attack. We have to be careful. Well, hey, Paula, thank you so much for that. Mike, the evidence, I mean, I have never seen this much evidence presented so early on in the case. And now they also have witnesses. And not only do they have DNA evidence and blood evidence and clothing evidence, the rock that he hit her over the head with, his blood on her jacket, her blood on her jacket, video of him throwing things into the dumpster, him being identified not by anyone else but a relative. Yes, she looks at the video of him throwing those items in the dumpster, and the woman that lives with them, yeah, that's Jose. That's a pretty damn good idea, I think, Mike. So they're building this case one step of the ladder at a time, and I don't know, and nor do I care how the defense is going to try to fight this, but they will try to create doubt. But again, this is not a jury trial. This is a judge. Mike.
Yeah, Billy, the interesting, I've never seen in any court this kind of opening statement. Usually the opening statements, the judges want to just get that opening statement done so they can move on to the actual part of the trial where the prosecution presents the evidence through witnesses. And in this case, it seems like the judge just allowed the prosecutor to talk about all of the evidence. Now, she will, when she starts the trial, probably late this afternoon, maybe it's starting already, or perhaps on Monday, she's going to have live witnesses. All that she talked about, the sergeant who found the Laken in the first circumstance, and try to get her, resuscitate her. Everyone else. So every piece of evidence will be introduced by a number of witnesses, because that's the way the evidence is actually brought into court and considered by the court. So I've never seen the judge allow this much time to go through, but apparently there's no objections at all by the defense attorneys. In New York, I would imagine that there would be multiple objections, but I didn't see any. But what's going to happen is on Monday, each and every piece of evidence will be introduced by a witness. And I think the defense really doesn't have a lot of cards to play. The only thing I think they can really do, from what I'm seeing so far, is they can just closely cross-examine the witnesses, try to pick out some inconsistencies. And really, at the end of the day, I think all they could possibly do is try to have the attempted rape charges, dropped, and that the judge not consider that and only consider the other parts of the case, which is really not much consolation. He's facing life behind bars anyway, but I don't think that they really have anything that they can go on the offense with and say, no, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, and their own witnesses. They may have possibly a DNA specialist to talk about, well, the odds of it being, Jose Ibarra's DNA is not 1 in 20 billion. It's only it's 1 in 50 billion, or whatever happens to be. But they're between a rock and a hard place. And on Monday, they're going to have to do their best to cross-examine and try to damage the prosecution's witnesses. And I will say, the female who was in that apartment, who identified him positively so that there could be no mistake that is his brother, I think that witness probably was horrified by what she found out. And she's, going to do her part and say, look, I want no part of this. This is not what anybody hears about. This guy did this. And oh, by the way, I am an illegal immigrant, and could you kind of look kindly upon me? But thankfully, she made that identification. And because his brother's DNA has a mutation, they could exclude the brother. So they can't pin it on anybody but Jose Ibarra himself. So far, so good in this case.
Mike, one of the things that, it was unusual for the judge to allow the opening statement to really be just a presentation of evidence. But the judge offered the defense to go first, and they chose not to.
Right.
So obviously, the defense wanted to hear everything the prosecution had, and I don't know how they're going to combat that. This is probably, I'm going to put this slide up on the screen. Dark blue jacket, mixture of Laken's DNA and defendant's DNA. Hair on jacket, consistent with Laken's. And the hair was forcibly removed, which also shows to a violent encounter.
Right.
Very powerful. And something we're not going to watch this whole thing now, but there were witnesses, the sergeant that responded, that they tried to perform CPR on Laken. Her injuries were too severe. He testified that really she was already dead. She was cold to the touch. I'm sure that, law enforcement that responds to a case like this, 22-year-old girl, nursing student, I'm sure they'll always remember this. We always use that expression. There are things you can never unsee once you see them, You can never unsee it. And this poor young girl, Laken Riley, doing the right thing every way, every part of her life, she was doing the right thing. And she didn't deserve this, And someone has to answer for this, And obviously, this individual here will be answering for it. This case, as we talk about the evidence, great, fantastic job by the police collecting the evidence. The district attorney, prosecutor Sheila Ross mentioned luck in what they did. And as I said, it's not luck. It's part of working really hard and doing your job correctly and following procedure and experience, all of those things. This is like for me and even Mike here, this is sort of a painful case to cover, especially if you have kids, grown kids but and you see the dangers that exist out in this world. And it's just, it's a terrible thing, And I know this became politically enhanced because of the illegal immigration and all that stuff, but I'd like to see any politician talk against this if their child was killed like this, by someone who's not supposed to be in this country, and that if you want to let someone in who's illegal, vet them, see who the hell they are. Don't just let some career criminal come into our country and keep the citizens of our country at the mercy of this individual, So, that's, we wanted to cover. Look, this case, there was so much evidence, so much powerful evidence. And again, it's the judge will make the decision here, not the jury. So that leads you to believe that this is going to be a rather quick trial. I don't see the defense presenting too much of a defense here. Mike, your final words.
Final words. One of the tragedies, one of the many tragedies in this case is Laken Riley. Right now, if she was alive, she would be helping people as a nurse and, doing good for the world. And the other part of the tragedy is her death was 100% completely preventable. And because of how he got into the country and how he was treated by, immigration officials and our own policies, this is the result of that carelessness and not really caring about the general public's health and welfare. And sadly, this isn't a solo case, a singular case. There are many cases like this, and now our criminal justice system has to deal with them. And hopefully, we'll have a successful prosecution, and everyone will get justice. Laken Riley's family will get justice. The public will get justice, and Jose Ibarra will also get the justice that he so deservedly should get. So just keep our fingers crossed, and we'll just keep monitoring this case.
Well, hopefully his justice will be life in prison without parole, and that will be his justice. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Bill Cannon on behalf of myself and Professor Mike Geary. Thank you for tuning in today. Have a great rest of your day, and God bless.
Take care.
One episode just ain't enough.